All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Build a Bot workshop presented by the City of Henderson, the College of Southern Nevada, and Talon, as well as our friends at Microsoft. Now, we've got a great program for you today. We're going to explore the world of bots and automation, how new and emerging tools from Microsoft are making it easier to create powerful solutions to improve communication and collaboration with a variety of user communities. And Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And so today we're going to see how a couple great examples of the way that they're accomplishing that mission through the use of low-code and no-code platforms like Q&A Maker and Power Virtual Agents. So we have a pretty big agenda for you guys today. We're going to dive deep into the world of bots and how Microsoft can enable everyday users to take advantage of powerful automation and communication features. After a quick round of introductions from the members of the City of Henderson and the College of Southern Nevada, as well as Talon, we're going to take a walking tour of the history of bots, where they've been used in the past, and how they're being used today. We'll see a few great examples of bots in action and begin to hear the story of how they're changing the way we interact with technology. From there, we'll learn about the fundamental pieces that comprise a bot, how to plan for, design, and build a bot. And because bot experiences are most successful when they evolve to meet the continuing needs of our users, we're going to discuss the importance of caring for your bot and what it takes to keep it going. The second half of the day will include a pair of workshops where we'll create real-world bots, starting with a very approachable and easy-to-use technology in Microsoft's Q&A Maker. And we'll move on from the world of Q&A Maker and step into the world of Power Virtual Agents, examining how PVA compares to the Q&A Maker service and how the sophistication in the PVA platform can enable even more complex bots, tapping into additional automation and cognitive services from Microsoft. We'll round out the day with a review of the details we covered and share some additional information on where to continue your learning and how to put your newly acquired knowledge into practice. Throughout the workshop, feel free to add questions to the chat, and as we can, we'll address them. We also ask that for both video and audio, you stay on mute so as not to distract from the presentation. And finally, a note, we're going to be recording this event so that you'll be able to revisit that content in the future, as well as look at some additional materials that will help supplement your continued learning. Soon after the event ends, we're going to be sending around an email with instructions on how to access the video, and we'll also include a link to a survey. We'd love to hear your feedback on how today's event went and provide some notes to us on how we can continue to improve events like this in the future. Now, before we begin the workshop, I'd like to introduce Deborah March, the mayor of the City of Henderson, to share some opening remarks and kick off the morning. So welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Matt, and what a pleasure it is to join all of you today as we kick off the Build a Bot workshop. We're so grateful to Talon, Microsoft, and especially to our partners at the College of Southern Nevada for making this opportunity available to you. This initiative aligns perfectly with the priorities of the City of Henderson. Over the last 10 years or so, we've been working hard to attract a diverse range of businesses to create more and better paying jobs. We want smart students like you to be able to find great jobs after graduation right here in our community. We've already welcomed companies like Amazon, FedEx, Google, and Haas Automation, the world's largest manufacturer of machines that build machines. They're investing in our community and bringing thousands of high-skill, high-paying jobs. To attract more companies like these, we want to focus on preparing the workforce of the future. We're working with Haas Automation and CSN to build a workforce training center, and we've invested in higher education opportunities like the new Betty Ingolstadt School of Health Sciences at CSN. And we also invest in initiatives like this, where students can learn from industry experts and develop high-tech skills. This program also aligns with Henderson's Smart City initiative, where we're investing in technology to help our city operate smarter, faster, and better. Becoming a smarter Henderson is another way that we can increase our economic competitiveness and enhance the quality of life for our residents and businesses that call Henderson home. From smart students to smart cities, Henderson plans to harness the technology and data to improve everything from transportation infrastructure to public safety and to transparency. In fact, we've been considering the use of an AI chatbot on our City of Henderson website so that the work that you do today could even influence how our city government communicates with our constituents. I'm so pleased to see so many of you participating in this unique experience, and I hope that you learn a lot today, but I also hope that you have a lot of fun along the way. And now I'd like to turn it over to Patty Charlton, Vice President and Provost of the Henderson campus of the College of Southern Nevada, and thank you very much.
All right, good morning, and thank you so much, Mayor March. It's always great to see you. Good morning, everyone, and as Mayor March said, I'm Patty Charlton. I'm the Campus Vice President at the Henderson campus of the College of Southern Nevada. We are so very excited to have you join us today for this Build About workshop. We are very grateful to the City of Henderson who presented this opportunity back in 2018. That's how long this has been planning. I really want to give a huge shout out and appreciation to Dr. Rebecca Gates, who's been working with Matt Allen, I think for a good 3 years to bring this to reality. So thank you so much, Matt and Rebecca. So while the COVID environment did delay our plans, here we are, and we are happy to be with you virtually today. We would have loved to have had you here in person in the fabulous Henderson Student Union, but all by virtual and doing this Build About, what a great way to kick this off. So there's some great engaging content that you're going to enjoy today. And so I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic training opportunity. The City of Henderson has been such a critical partner in our task of providing quality education to meet our workforce demands. Mayor March highlighted many examples, including Haas Automation, Google, Amazon, and we work very closely hand in hand together to build things such as our Betty Engelstadt Health Sciences building, where the City of Henderson has been a huge supporter, but they also turn to the College of Southern Nevada for a skilled workforce. And so this is just another great example in the information technology space. So again, none of that would be possible without the great leadership of Mayor March and her entire team at the City of Henderson. So I'd also like to thank our outstanding faculty, because I see several of our faculty that have joined the call today for this opportunity that they can share this wonderful information with their students, and we appreciate your participation. We hope that you enjoy today's workshop and that it will spark future interest in artificial intelligence. And now I'd really like to turn it back and get the program started back to Matt Allen with Talon. Matt, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thank you, Patty. I really appreciate that. We've got a couple more things we want to cover before we get into the content. Just real briefly, just introducing myself. I'm the host for today, but my role is going to be ending in a little bit as I transition over to our primary speaker. My name is Matt Allen. I'm Talon's managing director. And like a lot of you at College of Southern Nevada right now are studying computer science. I studied computer science in school, and so I've had the privilege of taking a front seat to the ever-changing world of application development since I began my career with Talon back in 1999. And Talon, as an organization, we are a professional services group that delivers technology to a variety of companies across the country and pretty much in every industry you can imagine. And it's our goal to partner with organizations like Microsoft to make that transition to modern technologies a reality. It was through our partnership with Microsoft that we were first introduced to the teams at CSN and Henderson, and that's what brought us together today. So a core component of the way we deliver projects is the inclusion of education in how we partner with our clients. Many of our leaders deliver educational events throughout the year on topics like Power BI, security, app modernization, and things like we're doing today with bot development. And I'm very happy to introduce Matt Krusick. Matt is our Chief Technology Officer, and he's our presenter for today. Matt's been with Talon for 10 years, and in that time, he's had his hands on just about every piece of technology you can think of, and has literally written the book on subjects like the Microsoft Bot Framework, Azure Cognitive Services, and developing solutions in Azure as a Pluralsight author. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road, and please welcome Matt Krusick to the event, and the floor is yours, Matt. Oh, and you're muted.
There we go. Thank you, Matt. I was saying it's so weird to have two Matts in one presentation. Okay, so thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We're definitely going to be talking about one of the topics that I'm super excited about. It's something that whenever we talk about AI, we talk about bots specifically, I'm usually brought in, even though my role here at Talon is CTO. It's something I'm super passionate about. So when Matt brought this opportunity up to me, I readily volunteered, only because it's something I love. So you guys are really in for a treat. So anyway, when we talk about bots, there are two very important questions that I find myself consistently asking when it comes to this technology, right? So what is the technology I'm trying to learn about and why do I care? Meaning, why is this important to me? Like, what does it deliver to me that it's going to make my life better? Now, that first question, it's relatively self-explanatory, but the second question is the more important of the two, because, as technologies, almost all new technologies are interesting to us, but, there's only so many hours in the day to learn things. So we have to be really selective about what we choose. I mean, I know myself, I'm constantly reading tons of articles on new technologies, but I only have about 5 minutes each to read. So it's really difficult for me to stay on top of every single thing. So I have to be very selective about what I choose to deep dive into. And I know you guys are the same. So I'm constantly evaluating, is this truly worth my time to learn and develop skills around this type of technology? So I always ask this question. So let's take a minute to answer the first part of that question. What is a bot? Now, when most people think about a bot, they're probably picturing something like this. But what I'm referring to is, when I talk about the term bot, is an application that performs an automated task. Now, the simplest use case for this is a chatbot. Now, I'll give you an example. Now, a couple of years ago, Domino's ran a very successful advertising campaign where you actually could text a pizza emoji to Domino's and they would deliver a pizza to you. And when I saw this, I was fascinated. I'm like, how do they understand like what I want on my pizza by just a pizza emoji? But there's a whole bunch of machinations behind it where they understand kind of what you want on your order and things of that sort. But the nexus behind it was a trigger, right? And that trigger is all utilizing bot technology. And another example is Cortana or Siri, which is really just a chatbot in voice form instead of text form. Now, when you ask Siri, what is the weather like today? It takes in your request and it does some back-end processing to figure out what you want, and then it spits back a reply, all without the intervention of another human being. That's a bot. Now, you know what bot is. Why should we care? Well, because it's a natural progression of the technology timeline. Think about how technology has progressed in the last 30 years. So 30 years ago, email was hailed as the newer, better, faster, stronger way to communicate with each other. Then, 10 years later, email became a dinosaur because it was way too much work for people to read that whole message. People wanted instant gratification, which meant SMS and mobile. Flash forward to today, where we are saturated with communication from Alexa, Facebook Messenger, to Instagram, to Twitter, you name it. I can't even keep up with them all these days. So our ability to communicate with each other has grown exponentially. And with all that exposure comes opportunity. And opportunity in the business world is like gold. The opportunity to get people's attention through bots. Now, companies are starting to focus more and more on resources on those mediums because it's where the audience is. And that means that's where you need to learn the language if you want to reach that audience. Now, speaking of evolution, let's talk a little bit about how bots have evolved over the years. Now, bots are not a new concept. And, I have found that in technology, whenever new things, quote unquote, come out, people who have been in technology for a lot longer than I have, they'll come to me and they'll say, oh, we've been doing that for like 25 years. So it's amazing how things kind of come full cycle and they come back. So bots have evolved a lot over the years. So in the beginning, we had our bot in its most simplistic form, which I refer to as the text word to number form. This form allows you to send a keyword to a medium to execute an action. For example, and they still have these today, texting the word add to a coupon service in order to be put on their mailing list. This form is based on one medium only, which is usually text messaging, and can only account for a limited number of keywords. It has no concept of natural language beyond the words that are pre-programmed in. You actually see a lot of these today when it comes to getting you off of these lists on SMS, where it says, text the keyword stop to get me off of this list. So that's a keyword. The second, more complex form allows for multiple mediums, often utilizing custom messaging, which include things like buttons and hyperlinks, but it's still kind of keyword based. Now, this level is proportionally harder to the programmer because you have to account for more than one medium. That means you have to be able to interpret multiple API formats, one for each medium. In addition, you have to account for multiple custom messaging types because each medium has a different way that they want the data structured, right? So Facebook has a way that it wants you to send it data, but Twitter has a completely different way it wants you to send it data. The only thing that remains the same is the fact that it's still keyword based, so your logic is still pretty straightforward. Now, the third and final form gets the best of everything, but with the most amount of cost. Not only do you have to account for multiple mediums and return message types, but now you have to account for understanding natural language as well, which in and of itself is rather difficult. And when I say natural language, what I mean is the ability to speak to an AI and have it be able to interpret your words as actions, right? So if I ask an AI, what time is it? The AI will be able to interpret what it is that I'm asking for and to be able to give me a response. It's not just about keywords. If it were about that, I could just say the word time, and the bot would take that keyword and then produce an action. I'm actually asking it utilizing language. Now, I want you to imagine having to write all these types from scratch, which is kind of daunting. Well, never fear, because the nice folks at Microsoft have come up with a solution to help you. They call it the Microsoft Power Platform. Now, for those of you who have not heard about the Microsoft Power Platform, it is a series of low-code, no-code applications that are targeted at citizen developers to enable them to be able to create bots and other applications quickly and easily. Now, for bots specifically, the service that we will be utilizing is called Power Virtual Agents, which is a service that is specifically designed for building chatbots at scale. Now, the term low-code, no-code, and citizen developer might be new to you, so let's talk a little bit about these for a moment so we're all on the same page with what those terms mean. I'm a really big proponent of understanding definitions before we start to roll things through, because one person might understand something one way, another person might understand something another way. So you'll find throughout this presentation, I'll say, all right, let's all understand something one way so that we can all be on the same page. So we're going to do that now. A citizen developer is a person who has not been formally trained as a software developer, but through the use of platforms that don't require you to write complex code at all, i.e. low code, no code, they can create rather elaborate programs, workflows, or in this case, chatbots, that allow them to enhance their everyday activities without having to rely on IT in order to create or make changes to the system. So, citizen developers, not a truly trained developer, but they can make programs utilizing the medium of low-code, no-code applications. A low-code, no-code application is an application that is designed to be a little bit more easier for a non-developer. So, as you might expect from a low-code, no-code solution, it's a piece of software that sits at the very top of a bunch of supporting services and applications. Now, some of these applications are things that run behind the scenes for you without you ever knowing, like the Microsoft Bot Framework, which is a series of open source software libraries and services that allow Power Virtual Agents to be able to build comprehensive and sophisticated bots quickly and easily, while others, like the rest of the Power Platform and Azure Cognitive Services, can be used to augment your bots and bring them to the next level. Now, we're going to be touching upon some of these services later in the workshop, so you'll get to experience how they can truly make the difference between a good bot and a great bot. So, now that we all know the technical definition of a bot, and a little history, and some notion of a platform to build them on, I still feel like we need to get a little bit more practical about how they work in real life. And the best way to do that is to break down how bots communicate with users. So, On one side, we have a user, and on the other side, we have a bot, and they need to somehow communicate with each other. Well, the first thing they need to do that is a channel. Now, a channel is just a medium in which your bot communicates. Now, there are a ton of different channels for bots. The one shown here is Facebook Messenger, but there's also Slack and Teams and SMS and web chat, just to name a few. Now that we have a channel, let's talk a little bit deeper. Now, it's obvious how the user interacts with that channel. In this case, it's through their keyboard. What we care about is how the bot interacts with that channel. Well, the channel exposes an API. And just so we're clear, an API is just a service that sits on the web that you can send and receive data from. And when the user types something in and receives a message whenever it gets a reply. Now, this allows it to communicate with our bot, which also exposes an API. Now, through this API, our bot is able to receive messages from our user, funnel through the channel, and in turn send messages back to the user through the channel. Now, this is admittedly a high-level architectural breakdown of how bots communicate. And as you begin to build bots, the channel on which your bot communicates is going to become something that becomes extremely important to take into consideration. Because depending upon what you're looking to do and the audience that you're looking to reach, the channel is going to matter. Now, the great thing about the Microsoft frameworks is that you can literally write one bot and deploy it on multiple channels. So that notion of having to rewrite it multiple times for multiple channels does not exist, which when I heard about for the first time, coming from, as a developer, I came from a world where I wrote mobile applications. And whenever I did so, every time I had to write one for iOS, I had to write a completely different one for Android. And it was just really agonizing. So when I found out I could just write one piece of code and I could deploy multiple places, I was like, oh my God, thank God, that was so cool. So this definitely takes care of it for you. Now, given that fact, let's take a look at the current summary of channels available natively to the bot framework. Now, some of the more popular ones on here are Microsoft Teams, Facebook, and also this thing called Direct Line, which is the channel that you will utilize when wanting your bot to communicate via web chat. Now, when I say web chat, what I mean is when you go onto the websites, you notice how you have that little icon that usually appears in the bottom right, and you click on it and it says, hey, how can I help you? You know, are you having trouble with this site? That's web chat. So it appears on a website. And the great thing about PVA, when I say PVA, Power Virtual Agents, just so you know, so I don't have to keep saying Power Virtual Agents, is that you don't have to create multiple bots, right? Like I said, you know, it's you write once, it deploys a million times, which is a fantastic feature if you're going to deploy all of these different places, right? So I can deploy one to Alexa, I can deploy one to Direct Line and Facebook, all with one code base. So, I know what you're all thinking. Yeah, Matt, that all sounds great in theory, but how does it really work? And are people really using it? Well, let's have a look at some chatbots that are being used right now by real companies in the wild and that are built using Power Virtual Agents. So, I don't know if all of you have heard of this company, but it's called Trugreen. I actually have used it on my own lawn at home. But they are a company that you can call in that will help to make your lawn healthier and greener. And case in point, my lawn was horrible when I first bought my house and is actually quite nice now. And the bot on the left is showcasing to you an actual conversation that I picked up when I was having with the Trugreen bot that is right on their website. And in here, basically, what I'm able to do is chat with a virtual assistant and is able to kind of walk me through some various different pieces that I can do on their site. Now, I could hypothetically go to their site and do these things, but it's often nicer to be able to interact with a bot. And this is right on the Trugreen website today. You could log on to Trugreen and you could interact with this bot. and I actually have as a Trugreen customer. Now, if you haven't heard of Trugreen, I know you all have heard of HP. If you haven't, you definitely need to crawl under whatever rock you've been living under for the last 20 years. But HP is another company that has taken full advantage of bot technology, and they have done it in such a way of the use case that I hear the most, which is customer service, right? Every time that I talk to a client, almost 90% of the time, it's usually about customer service, right? You have a customer service organization. They have a top 10 questions that usually get asked, and they want to try to free up some of their resources through a bot, through an automated service. And usually they have what's known as an IVR service, which is, if you've ever called up customer service, it's that automated thing that you listen to on the phone, which actually you can do utilizing Microsoft bot technology. You actually can create that IVR service utilizing Power Virtual Agents. So it's actually pretty cool. So you can have it talking on the phone, and you can have it right on the website. So it's perfect for these types of scenarios, and HP is taking full advantage of it. So these are two pretty high-profile companies that are taking advantage of this technology today. So when you ask me the question, is it really being used? The answer is absolutely it's being used, and it's being used very effectively. So hopefully these real-life stories have gotten you excited about building some bots. So now that I have you all in the mood, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how a bot goes from conception to creation. So let's talk for a moment about the life cycle of a Power Virtual Agents bot. I'm saying Power Virtual Agents. I said I'm going to say PVA, but now I'm saying it the long way. So there are many steps in the life cycle, and it really is truly a life cycle, because anytime that you are creating something that is utilizing AI, it's something that is going to require what I call care and feeding, meaning that it's going to evolve over time and become better and better the more data it receives about how to do its job. That entire journey, however, begins with a single step: creation, as it more often than not does. So a lot of people, when they go to create a chat bot, they simply do just that. They go and create a chat bot. But most of the time, they don't stop and think about UX. And why should they, right? Chatbots aren't like web pages. There isn't any design involved, right? Wrong. I would proffer that there's actually more design involved in chatbot development than there is in website development. Let me just say that again. I would proffer that there is actually more design involved in chatbot development than in website development. Think about actors who play parts that don't speak. They have to get extra proficient at their body movements to tell a story. Same idea here. There are some basic principles of UX design that you need to keep in mind when creating your chatbot. And I have witnessed companies who forget this, and they end up with a chatbot that does very poorly, and they blame it on the technology. And I'm like, the technology is completely sound. I said, you built a poor chatbot, and it's because you did not start with UX design. So this is extremely important in building a chatbot, an effective chatbot. So the first is you need to understand the channel that you are utilizing, right? Who is the audience that we're trying to reach? What are the rules of the platform that we're on? Let me show you an example. So let's look at a chatbot right here. And this is a lost and found chatbot that is made for the SMS channel. Now, you see, as we walk through the flow, the bot is telling the user things it can say, and the user is typing those words and also doing things like sending pictures to the bot. Now, all of these things are possible in the SMS channel. However, you will notice that the UI is kind of somewhat limited here. Now, let's compare this with a different version of this bot. Now, again, because you can deploy one bot to multiple channels, this is the same code. Now, this is the exact same type of bot, but it's taking advantage of all of Facebook Messenger's components, like buttons that allow you to send messages instead of having to type. Plus, there are rules about messaging on Facebook Messenger that are different about rules about messaging on SMS, such like how many times you can proactively engage with someone on Messenger without their consent. All of these things need to be taken into consideration when you're designing your bot, right? I think with SMS, there's certain rules about how long the message has to be, the fact that you have to give an ability to stop messaging. With Facebook Messenger, you can proactively send a message once, but after that, you cannot bother the person again unless they ask you, right? So there's all these rules to the road depending upon what channel you're using. Now, another trap that chatbot developers will often fall into is to try and cram every single piece of functionality into one bot, which brings me to my next rule. Don't try to do everything. Ask yourself, what is the overall purpose of this bot? And every time you're going to try to put a new feature in, think about if the bot is achieving that purpose with this new feature. Remember, you're not trying to create the next Alexa or Siri here. It's better to do a few things well than do a lot of things okay. I actually had this client come to me once, and he wanted to design a bot that was going to help to run this like fantastically futuristic hotel. And he said, well, it's going to be like the next Siri. And I said, well, do you understand how massive an undertaking that is? Because you are trying to cram all this functionality into one bot. And a lot of people, they don't really understand, that kind of segregation. And in speaking to the developers at Microsoft, it has become clear that, creating this ability to modularize some of that stuff is very important, because you really just want your bot to do a couple things well, because a person is inevitably going to remember a bot that did a couple things well really easily, but it's also going to remember a bot that did things poorly really easily, right? So you don't want to fall into that poorly category, okay? So be careful with that. Now, because chatbots have penetrated every aspect of our lives, it has become even more important to think about your audience when building your chatbot, and that means setting a tone. Now, who is the chatbot audience? Does its language relate to the target users? Take this example on the left. Now, do you think that the readers of the magazine, The Economist, will relate to someone talking to them like this? Now, of course, this is a really extreme example, but you get the idea, right? Being able to set a tone for your audience will help to engage them and make them want to come back for more. I remember an example I saw once of an H&M bot. And the H&M bot, it had a very young type of tone to it. And I remember thinking, wow, I must be old, because I was interacting with the bot and I was like, I don't relate to this at all. But I think that, my daughters probably would, right? So it all depends on the audience you're trying to hit. Now, finally, this last rule sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but trust me, it's the one that gets violated the most. And that's create a path to success. So what do I mean by that? I mean, do not make the bot too open-ended. Now, let's look at an example. Now, here I have what I call the DOS bot. Now, for those of you who don't know, DOS is an old-school Microsoft command line application. And the beauty of DOS was that it was extremely powerful. Now, the problem with DOS, and the problem that I had with DOS, is that you had to know the command you needed to make that happen, right? And that's pretty much true of every command line application. I just use DOS because it's the most recognizable. Now, you would think that in the chatbot world, this would be great, right? Because you want to have that kind of experience, that same kind of experience when you're talking to a person. But for the experience to be that kind of experience, the bots would need to be as smart as people are. And they are not people. No matter how much AI we cram into them, they are never going to be able to truly mimic the same kind of experience that you would have with a person. And that actually causes a lot of frustration, because what your user ends up trying to do is guess what the bot can do rather than you leading the user through a path, right? So look at this bot instead. It's the same one that we saw from before, right? So we're leading a user through a series of choices. And that's the experience that we want. We still want to give the user options, but we want to control the flow. Now, not only does it mitigate uncertainty, but it ensures that the user gets to where they need to go, right? So again, you want to be flexible enough to make it seem like you're chatting with someone through natural language, right? So in this case, instead of having to say the word drop off or just the word drop off, you could utilize natural language to say, you know, hey, I want to be able to drop it off, and it could equate that to the word drop off, and that could work just fine, right? And you're still utilizing a natural language, and it seems like you're talking to a person. But if you are trying to make it like the experience on the left, then it's just not going to work, because you're never going to be able to program a bot that is going to account for every single thing that someone could say. Now, once we finish the creation stage of the game, we get into the build stage. Now, besides the obvious, there are many ways to kickstart our chatbot into high gear development by utilizing some of the out-of-the-box tools that Microsoft provides you. Whenever I'm talking to clients, one of the things I always suggest in order to make their chatbot experience more robust is to utilize information that they already have created. Now, most everyone nowadays has some sort of an FAQ that they've developed. Well, Microsoft has a tool called Q&A Maker that we're going to look at a little bit later, and it has the ability to extract data from an FAQ and incorporate it into your bot quickly and easily. This way, you're able to see value right away without a lot of development dollars. Now, FAQs are really only the tip of the iceberg in terms of what your bot can learn, however. In order to bring your bot to that next level, you can incorporate natural language into it to make it seem more human and lifelike. Now, up until now, I have been talking about natural language quite a bit, but it is completely possible to build a bot without natural language. Now, this is done through a service called Lewis, which is Microsoft's natural language cognitive service. Now, when I say cognitive service is basically AI in a box, okay? Now, we all know that AI tends to be difficult, right? Back in the day, in order to do AI effectively, you had to be a data scientist, and you had to know all these complicated equations and all of this, statistics and all of this stuff. And it was completely unreachable for, your common developer, let alone a citizen developer. But what Microsoft has done is rather brilliant, in fact. It's basically said, we have all of these typical scenarios that utilize AI. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these models, and we're going to make them available to developers. And all we're going to do is we're going to say, this is what you're going to send in, and this is what you're going to get out. And essentially, it's created an AI in a box. So Lewis is one of these types of cognitive services, and it allows us to create a language model that utilizes pre-programmed AI in order to have your bot understand what users are asking of it without having to be so specific with your scenarios, right? So let's look at an example. Now, in a world without Lewis, if we had a user say the word hi, we would have to have logic inside the bot to detect if the word hi was said, if we wanted the bot to respond with the words, hi, how are you, right? Makes sense. Look for the word hi, then do this. However, if we now are given the word hello, there is no logic for handling that word. So we get no outgoing message because the bot has absolutely no idea how to handle that word. We would have to program something for every single way that you could say hello in order to always return the right message. Now, in a world with Lewis, we don't have to worry about all that because our AI model takes care of recognizing that hi, hey, and hello are all greetings, and they should I'll be responding with the phrase, "Hi, how are you?" Thus, saving us have to do all that work of putting in all of those use cases. That is the power of natural language. This was the example that really kind of had a breakthrough for me. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to do all of that stuff. That's fantastic, because as a programmer, we are all inherently lazy, right? We want to find the quickest way to go, right? And with this, I just have to put in a bunch of examples, and then Lewis will take care of the rest. So when I found this, it was fantastic. Now, the fact that bots can understand and respond to your users is all well and good, but sometimes we need it to actually do things for us. That is where our configure stage comes in. Now, bots can connect into backend systems using APIs and other tools like Power Automate, which is part of the Microsoft Power Platform, to make it so they can do the heavy lifting for you. So, one of the great things about PBA, did it that time, is that it connects seamlessly into the brothers and sisters from the Power Platform family. One being Power Automate, which is a great workflow engine that can empower your bots to trigger flows that call backend systems without having to write a stitch of code. Now, the best part, and the most of these low-code, no-code workflows, they're already templated out for you. So all you really need to do is put in your specific piece of information. So for example, if you want your bot to send an email to customer service, all you need to do is plug in your provider information. This helps bring a whole nother level to your bot. We once created a bot where it would look at a conversation, and if it found a certain word, it would just simply send an email out to customer service saying, oh, this keyword was recognized, right? And through Power Automate, it was simple. We just plugged in, this is the person we want to email to, we connected it into their provider, and we were off to the races. Now, if you recall, when we talked about chatbot UX design during the creation stage, I said you should try to make your bot only be good at a few things and not try to make it good at everything. Well, I'm about to give you a way around that rule by giving you the ability to enhance your bot with skills. Everything's a best practice until I tell you otherwise, right? So the best way to describe skills are bots that call other bots. Now, that sounds confusing, but let me give you a perfect example. I would assume that most of you in this room or on the phone have probably used either Cortana or Alexa before. Now, when you use these devices and you want to say, get the news from CNN or Fox News, whichever you prefer, you have to download the CNN app or skill in order to do that. Then you would say, Alexa, ask CNN to tell me the news, indicating that you want Alexa to access the CNN skill to get the news. Well, that's an example of one bot, Alexa, calling another bot, CNN, to get the skill. So that doesn't break our rule of creating a bot that can do only a few things well, but it does allow our bot to call another bot that can do that thing well. In that case, we extend our functionality without worrying about violating that principle, right? So you just essentially modularize all of that functionality into one bot, and then you just simply call whatever you want in order to do those simple things well. Now, once we have a bot in a state where we're happy with all the functionality, it will inevitably come time to release it. For a lot of citizen developers, this can sometimes seem like a daunting task, and don't tell anyone but developers too. Now, on other platforms, it can be a daunting task, but luckily, PBA makes it extremely straightforward. All of your development needs are right here, baked into the platform and at your fingertips. And as I mentioned when I talked about design, it's important to understand the channel that you're trying to use in order to meet your customers. Now, luckily, you don't have to pick just one channel. Remember, you can deploy to multiple channels. And the best part is you can do it all utilizing the same code base, and you can do it through the Power Virtual Agent interface that we're going to go over later. But wait, there's more. You're probably noticed that because there's a big blank space there. Yes, releasing is not the end of the line, because if it's one thing you need to understand about AI is it is never over. It's all about constant care, feeding, and refinement. This is one thing. Every single time I talk to a client, I almost always inevitably say, Matt Allen can definitely attest to this. I always say, it's all about care and feeding, right? It's not a one and done. You have to consistently go back, recycle, make it better, right? That's what AI is all about. So we need to improve. How do we do that? In order to be able to improve your bot, however, you need to understand how your bot is performing. Now, luckily, PVA has the ability to provide data and analytics on almost every aspect of your bot, including engagement rates, questions asked, number of users, a whole bunch of different things. Now, over time, the ability to collect and pivot on data will give you the information you need to alter your bot's flow and make it that much more alluring and helpful to your audience. This really helps in a couple of different cases, one being FAQ bots. For example, if you think about a traditional FAQ on a website, if a person comes to your site and they have a question in mind, and this actually happens to me quite a bit, and I'm like, man, hopefully it's in the FAQ, and I go there and I'm like, oh man, it's not. I pretty much stop there, right? And I say, all right, well, that's not the product for me. I'm gonna go on to the next one. But in a bot FAQ, and I ask the question, the bot can capture that information, and I can look on a report, and I can say, well, this question was asked that is not in your knowledge base. So that improvement can be done for me to take that question, add it to my knowledge base for next time, so that now I can understand, well, a lot of people are asking that question that I don't have. You know, that's something that a lot of people want to know, so I can add that to my knowledge base. Another thing that I've seen, especially in retail bots, is understanding where in the bot flow people decided to bail, right? When you're trying to sell something via a bot, understanding at what point someone said, yeah, this isn't for me, is extremely important, right? And being able to have that level of scrutiny is what is going to help you to refine the bot's language and the bot's UX to make it more alluring for people to stay around and to buy the product at the end. So that wraps up the history of bots and the life cycle of bots. So hopefully by now you all are unbelievably salivating to start to see how it's actually all done, to see how the sausage is made, so to speak. So we're just going to have a small break, and after that, come back and I will talk about Q&A Maker.
Thanks very much, Matt. So we are about 10 minutes before the hour, so that's a perfect amount of time for us to take our break. We'll keep this active and ongoing, so you no need to come back. I would just say leave the Teams meeting up, and we will restart at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. For those folks that may have stepped away, we've got about 5 more minutes left in the break. As I mentioned in the chat, if there's anything that you want to ask about, now's a great time to throw those comments in the chat. And if Matt can, he'll ask them in line, or we can always answer them in the chat as well. All right, it's 10 o'clock and we are ready to get started again. Matt, are you all set to pick up where we left off?
Yes, I am all set.
Excellent. And just before Matt dives back in again, just encouraging folks to reach out via chat if any questions come up. We had a great comment come in from Nasser regarding the benefits of having sort of a fundamental understanding of logic and programming concepts as we think about even tapping into platforms that are low code, no code in nature. Certainly you don't have the requirement to understand the syntax of a complex programming language to interact with these platforms, but a basic understanding of logic and application development concepts is very helpful. And as Matt mentioned, in addition to that, always considering the experience side of things is very critical as you start to design and build out bots. Putting yourselves in the shoes of your users and having an empathetic lens to look through will ensure that you're providing them with a service that's comfortable and engaging and welcoming to the point where they come back for more. So great comments, Nasser, and we welcome more like that in the chat.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so Q&A Maker. Okay, so before we jump into some show and tell with some demos, I want to review really quickly what Q&A Maker is. So in a nutshell, the Microsoft Q&A Maker service allows you to extract data from FAQ pages, websites, manuals, etc., and convert it into a chatbot. So for example, if you have a question like, what are your hours today in your FAQ page, you can convert that piece of data into a bot where the user can then ask, what are your hours today, and receive an answer. Now, in my opinion, Q&A Maker was one of the most ingenious things that Microsoft ever developed in the chatbot universe. The reason being that almost 99.9% of the time, whenever I talk to a client about chatbots, one of the requirements is almost always the ability to answer questions and disseminate information. It doesn't matter the type of chatbot or the industry vertical. Obviously, whenever you think about customer service, as I alluded to before in the case of HP, these types of bots always come to mind. Why doesn't my computer work? It's not plugged in. How long until the technician gets here? Between 10 minutes and never. But it could be useful for restaurants, like shown above, retail situations, banking, and many more. Now, in almost every single bot that I build, I almost always put one of these guys in automatically because it helps to give the bot some meat on the bone. So what are some of the details of this service? Well, it allows you to manage, test, and train in an easy-to-use UI, right, as we're going to be seeing in a minute. It is, of course, a no-code, one-click bot creation. It allows you to easily add personality into your bot and make it more lifelike. It also has the ability to support more than 50 languages, and it's easy to scale. All of these different features are all built into this one service. And again, it is low code, no code, so it's built with citizen developers in mind. So let's have a demo, finally. I just so happen to have this page up on my web browser. Okay. So the main website that you're going to go to when you are creating Q&A Maker is this one. And that is qnamaker.ai. And, I debated whether or not I was going to, when I do these kinds of things, I've done them where they're interactive. Obviously, because we're in a webinar, I can't do it here. But when we were talking about still doing this live, we debated whether or not this was going to be interactive or not. I tend to think that it's with these types of things, it's easier to see it first and then go back and play with it later, especially since this is being recorded. And because I'm a Pluralsight author, I know what it's like to try to touch upon every single aspect of what it is that I'm trying to talk about. So I'm going to try to make sure that I do that, cover all that for you. Yes, Chit Chat is a great feature. I'm actually going to display it here. So I just got a message in the chat. It actually makes your bot that much more robust by utilizing it. So it's pretty neat. It's one of those things where it makes it more Alexa-like to kind of put it out there. You'll see in a minute. So at any rate, as I said, this is a cognitive services. This is a cognitive service as indicated up here on the left where it says cognitive service. And as I said before, cognitive services are basically pre-programmed AI services that Microsoft has created and exposed to developers. So the great thing is that you don't have to be a data scientist to either create or utilize them. It's already done for you. So the first thing that you want to do when utilizing this page is to log in. And I've actually already done so over here on the right. And I've logged in with my personal Azure account, but you are going to be wanting to do it with your Azure account. So depending upon if you are doing it with an organization or you have one that you've created for yourself, Microsoft actually gives free Azure subscriptions for 30 days, regardless of whether or not you're a student. But I think if you're a student, you either get it for longer or you're part of an organization that you can get access to it. So you would log into that. And so step one, we actually want to create our Q&A service. Now, if you read this little paragraph here, so you're going to go over to create a knowledge base. And if you read this little paragraph here, it says, create an Azure Q&A service from your knowledge base if you already have one, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let me just stop here and break some things down for you, because as simple as it seems, I always get some people who get confused here with the hierarchy of things. So let's do a comparison. Let's say that you are a McDonald's franchise owner. Okay, bear with me for a minute. So think of your Azure subscription as the entire McDonald's franchise. It's at the top of the chain. Now, directly below, we have your specific McDonald's right down the road. That is comparable to your Q&A service. So what this is saying is that if you've already built your McDonald's, then you don't need to build it again. So since we don't have ours built, let's build it by doing create a Q&A service. So on this page, we need to create our service. And out of all the screens, this is the one that will probably feel the most daunting if you're doing each step of this on your own and you've never created an Azure subscription before. Now, if you're utilizing either a company's Azure subscription or someone else is doing it for you, you don't have to worry. But you're going to want to get your values from your IT department or whoever is managing it. But if you're doing it yourself, I'm going to be using some of the ones that I have in my organization. So these are not going to be the same ones that you're going to use. Just keep that in mind. So for me, I'm going to use a subscription called Dev Playground. And I have a resource group inside of that I have especially for this kind of thing. So I'm going to use that. And my resource group is going to be RG Matt Krusick Dev 001. And if that seems like a weird name, it kind of is, but it's Microsoft best practice. It stands for resource group and then my name, and then it's a development environment, and then it's number one of the development environment. So Microsoft have all these naming standards about how to name things. So we utilize those here. So after that, what we're going to do is we are going to one thing I did want to mention is you do have the option of creating a new resource group here if you don't have one. And if you find that this drop-down box is blank, then you're going to want to hit create new here. I already have one, so I don't have to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to name our Q&A maker or our McDonald's franchise. So I'm going to utilize the Microsoft naming standard, which is to utilize the prefix cog, which stands for cognitive, and then a dash. Then the project name, which I will say is Matt's Q&A. And then dash the environment. I'm hoping that I don't already have this created and I deleted it. If not, I'll have to come back. So it's going to be cog Matt's Q&A dash dev, and just to make sure, I'll do a dev one. Actually, if I tab out, it should tell me. Ah, yes, it's already there. All right, so Now, I have a little green checkbox, which basically tells me, yep, it's good. It's not already there, so you can utilize it. Now, for pricing tier, if we open this up, you'll notice that I already have one selected, but there are two different types of pricing. So if I click this Learn More, now you're offered two different types of pricing. One is free and one is S1. Now, the difference between free and S1 is that it just depends on how many transactions and features you get, right? So it's all about the number of documents that you can upload, and it's all about the number of transactions per month. So just keep that in mind. You're only going to need to have free, so you can choose the free, which I actually already have one free inside my subscription. So I can't choose free, so I'm going to choose standard. So you can actually only have one free inside your subscription, and someone, gosh darn it, already took it away from me. So, so for the next bit, you're going to need to have these two pieces right here. So besides the Q&A Maker service, there are actually two other services that we need to add in order to make this work. So the first is Azure Search, in which we're going to simply select free as our pricing tier. And the other is this app service details, which are also going to, now that needs to have a website location. And the website location is just default to East US. So one of the things that I want to keep in mind here is that these two different services basically go into some of the functionality of Q&A Maker. I could go into basically what they do, but I think it's a little out of the scope of what I'm trying to teach you here. So regardless to say, just know that you need them. And what I would try to do is utilize as small a tier as possible here. Okay. Application Insights. Application Insights is for all that logging and telemetry data that we talked about, right? All of that, you know, I asked this and I did not have that answer in my knowledge base, so you're going to want to have that enabled. So I'm going to hit Review and Create. And then I'm going to hit Create. And it's going to go ahead and it's telling me that I have gone over my free quota. There we go. So it is starting to create all of the things that I need to create my Q&A Maker. Now, that is the hardest part of having to do this. I promise it only gets simpler from here. So I'm going to close this out because we didn't want to think about that because that was way too intense. So after we've done that, we need to hit this refresh button. So what this refresh button does is essentially it refreshes these drop-down boxes to illuminate what that new subscription was and that new service that we created was. Okay, so again, we're going to go with our McDonald's analogy. So let's select our franchise, which is McDonald's, or in my case, it's Dev Playground. And then we are going to select our local store in that franchise, which is the service we just created. There it is. Probably still building it, that's why. All right, well, it's still building that, so we'll use the one that I used last time. That's what happens with live demos. When I usually do this, I'm doing it recording. So at any rate, we're going to use that one, which is the one that I had created previously. But I guarantee there's really no difference between them. Trust me, I'm a professional. So now we're presented with language. Okay, so you'll notice that this is a drop down. It indicates that these will say these are basically the languages that are going to go into the chit chats, that if we decide to add chit chat to our Q&A maker instance, that it's going to be in this language. Okay, and some of these are available in chit chat and some of them aren't. So mine, the one that I had here, was defaulted to English, so I'm just gonna keep it in English. Okay, so now we're going to go down here to knowledge base. Now, continuing with our analogy, think of knowledge base as a menu, right? So we have our local McDonald's store, which is our Azure Q&A service, right? So now our local McDonald's store has a menu. So sometimes there's different menus for different parts of the day, right? So have you ever gone to McDonald's and at 12:01 and you're like, I'd like an egg McMuffin, please? And they're like, oh yeah, sorry, we just closed the breakfast menu. And you're like, curses, traffic. Yeah, so there's different menus at different parts of the day. Sometimes breakfast, lunch, all those menus are part of your local McDonald's menu, but they would be different than, say, the McDonald's menu over in Paris. So you see kind of the hierarchy here, right? So the McDonald's store and then the McDonald's menu. So the menu is your knowledge base. So you could have many different knowledge bases inside one Q&A service, okay? So we want to create a knowledge base. So we want to give our knowledge base a name, and I'm going to prefix this with KB, and then we're going to name this knowledge base Surface 10 Windows 10, because we're going to create a knowledge base based on a page that gives some information utilizing, wait for it, a Surface Pen for Windows 10. I know, it's super interesting. I know you're so jazzed to hear about it. But it's going to utilize a bunch of different pieces that I want to showcase for you inside Q&A Maker. And depending upon the document that you utilize, it may not be able to utilize all those pieces. And this one utilizes them perfectly. So it's a really nice demo piece. So on to the next step. And one of the things I love about this, and Microsoft's done this a lot with a lot of some of their services, is they've made everything very step-by-step. And I've noticed it a lot when it comes to bots. It's all, okay, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And that really works out well for citizen developers, because I noticed that when they first started doing these things, this was not here. So you kind of had to guess your way around having to do some of this stuff. So that's really good. So the next step is to supply Q&A Maker with an actual page or document where this information exists. So a couple pieces of information about this. One, now recall when we looked at pricing, I said the amount of documents varies based on your pricing tier. Well, here's where that matters, right? So for the free version, you can only upload 3 different documents, which for us is fine. But if you're an actual organization where you're going to want a bunch of different documents, that's not going to work. I once had a client that wanted to upload FAQs for all 50 states. So, for example, that would not work for them here. Now, the second thing to think about is you can upload either a document with these types of formats or a web page that needs to be structured in a question-answer type of format. So, for example, let's open up a web page that showcases some of those formats. So this page tells you about some of the different formats that Q&A Maker accepts and works best with it. Now, I have found in all of my dealings with the Q&A Maker service that I tend to use these as more of a guideline, because Q&A Maker is actually quite adept at disseminating information. And while Microsoft has put out these format guidelines, most of the time, Q&A Maker is pretty good at picking up almost anything. But the closer you are to this kind of format, or at least following these kinds of guidelines, the better the data is coming in. And even if you get data coming in that doesn't look perfect, you can then go and edit it afterwards. But why have to edit it afterwards if you could pull it in perfect the first time, right? That's what I say. So go back to here. Okay, this is now the third thing you need to keep in mind. This is a one-time upload. This is the thing that gets most people and gets most of my clients, right? What I mean by that is, let's say at 9 a.m. on a Monday, you upload this and you have a source URL, right? www.myfaq.com. And then at 9:05, that source URL changes and you have 5 more new questions on there, okay? That does not mean that your knowledge base gets updated as well, okay? You'd have to manually update your own knowledge base. That really trips some people up. They're like, oh, wait a minute, I updated the web page and the Q&A Maker is connected. No. It's a one-time data extraction. So whatever's there right now is what we're going to get. And then if it gets updated, yours does not get updated. So we're going to go to the page that I am going to utilize, which is going to be this page. And here you can see that I have several headers and videos and whatnot, right? So I've got different headers with different header types, and I've got kind of tables and things like that. And one of the things I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to click off this Enable Multi-Turn Extraction from URL. And I'm going to explain what this means in a moment. Now down here for our last option, we have Chit Chat. Yay. And I want to give a little more detail, right? So essentially Chit Chat will take some of the standard basic questions and responses with personalities in mind and add them to the knowledge base, right? It's just a nice little added feature that gives it a little bit more authenticity. Now, since we're creating a bot that's going to talk about a rather professional piece of hardware, let's pick professional. Right? But it could be any of these. So let's take our URL and let's add it in here. Okay. So now that URL is successfully added into our list, and notice that I could add multiple. Right? I could add multiple URLs, I could add multiple files, all in one knowledge base. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got our chit chat, we've got our URL, we've named it. Let's do create. Oh, no default answer found. Okay, so what a default answer is, let's do that's easier to explain once we actually get into the knowledge base. So I'll just say no answer. Sometimes it's easier seeing it in an example. Again, if anybody has questions along the way, please feel free to add them in the chat. I usually say at the beginning of these things, all the content that I've created is really just to fill the space. Honestly, I've had webinars where I've sat there and answered questions for a straight half hour before I've actually gotten into any of my content. So I'm happy to answer them. I'm happy to answer technical questions or philosophical questions about bots. So feel free, absolutely. So what it's doing right now is it's utilizing all of the AI pre-programmed functionality to look at that page and extract out all of the different knowledge base pieces and to create our knowledge base. So right away, you're going to notice one thing. You're going to say, hey, you know, what are these things? I did not put these question and answers in, right? Did you get hurt? That was not like, did you get hurt is not on this page. Right? Why is it here? Okay. Those are the things that Chit Chat put in. Okay, so that's how Chit Chat works. Chit Chat takes all of those, you know, kind of default, I don't want to say silly, but kind of default questions, and they put it into your knowledge base. And you can understand where some of that stuff comes from if you look up here and you look to source. So if you look at source, it says Q&A Chit Chat Professional. So this question and really these series of questions all come from that one source. Because remember, when we were on the previous page, you can have multiple different sources all go into one knowledge base. So it is ultimately really important that you understand what questions came from what source. And this is one way in which you can do it. Now, in order to see our data, we actually have to go all back of the bus to the last page. So let's go page 13. Okay, so right now, let's talk about what we see, right? So right here, like we said, we see source right here up at the top. And we're able to kind of open and close that source. Or we would be able to close that source. Oh, someone submitted a bug to Microsoft. I love live demos. There we go. Okay, so anyway, everything that's underneath this source are all the things that we got extracted from our website, right? Which is what we were expecting, right? This is what, when we opened up our knowledge base, this is what we wanted to see, okay? This helped me reinforce the point that this can come from multiple sources. Okay, next, you will see that we have three specific columns here. We have context, we have question, and we have answer. So what are these and what's in them? So context and question. Now, in order to understand these two columns, we need to compare single-step answers and multi-step answers, right? I told you I was going to explain to you what a multi-step answer was, so here it is. So a single-step answer. Let's go back to page 1 and I can show you what I mean. So look at this first one. Did you get hurt? This is a single-step Q&A. A single-step Q&A is defined as user asked a question, bot answers, and done. Now, for this specific Q&A, the context represents the base question being asked. You see, it's also the first question in our question list, right? Did you get hurt? Did you get hurt? But there's also multiple after that. Now, you'll also notice we have an answer here that says, I don't have a body. Okay, so if I were to say to the bot, did you get hurt? The answer would say, I don't have a body. Okay, but if I also were to ask the bot, do you have fingers? The answer would be, I don't have a body. Okay, so the fact that the context is, do you get hurt, is just representative of the very first question on our list. Okay, so that's all that means there. So let's test that theory. There is a button up here called test, and that will push out this little menu here and allow us to actually test against the bot. So okay, so we asked, do you get hurt? And we get the response, I don't have a body. Let's ask some of the other ones. Can you cry? I don't have a body. Okay, we get the drift, right? I ask all those questions, I get this answer. These are variations of questions on a single context. Now, the other thing that you'll notice is we have a bunch of questions under here. Oh, sorry. So let's talk for a moment about multi-questions, okay? Because that's a single question. So let's talk a little bit about multi-questions. So you'll notice here that you have several different tiers under this context, right? In fact, you have several different tiers under this context. So let's say that I want to ask this question. How to use your Surface Pen. Okay, let's try that. I can start over by doing this. Now notice what happened here, okay? It wasn't an answer that came back. You actually got a series of sub-questions that came back. And that is representative of all of these. So if I actually click to this Windows 11 sub-question, it comes down to here. So Windows 11, and then it gives me an answer. So let's click Windows 11, Windows 10. Then I finally get to an answer. So this is the multi-step functionality that is different from a single step question, right? So if we go back to page 1, do you get hurt? I don't have a body, right? As opposed to right? Now, there are some that are multi-step, right? So in this case, it gives us an answer, but it also gives us even more questions. And then it continues to go, right? This is actually a new piece of functionality that did not exist in Q&A Maker when they first came out with it, right? It's something that people were finding that when they asked a question, they inevitably had a follow-up question that they wanted to understand more, right? So, you know, where do I get my fishing license? You get it at the DMV. Where is the DMV? Oh, that's down on Front Street, right? So it's kind of this idea of following this breadcrumb trail of questions that you can have the bot understand and ask. So I showed you a little bit about how single questions and multi-questions work, and I showed you a little bit about how you test something, but I want to circle back a little bit on test and elaborate a little bit more on what you're seeing here. So test allows us to do just that, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So first off, again, I want to start this conversation over. So I'm going to click this start over button. And that'll clear the screen and it'll start the conversation over. So now let's type a question. Which gives me this interact with Surface in new ways, you know, blah, 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 blah. Which doesn't exactly match my question here, but Q&A Maker's smart enough to take an educated guess. So now, if I look for this specific question, which I think is on, it's on page 10. There it is. Okay. So Windows 11, Windows, right? So interact with your Surface in new ways. So it doesn't exactly match, right? Windows 11, Windows 10 technically is the question, but I didn't ask that question. I asked, how do I use my pen with Windows 10? Okay, but Q&A Maker is smart enough to kind of connect those dots, right? And we can find out more if I click this little inspect button. Because every time that you send a piece of data to Q&A Maker or any AI on the Microsoft stack for that matter, it makes a guess and it sends back a confidence score. And that confidence score is really what determines how the AI works, right? So for example, in this case, my confidence score was 68.54. So it's 68% confident that the answer I'm looking for is this interact with your Surface in new ways, okay? So let's try another test. Let's try now notice my confidence score. My confidence score is 100%. And the reason why my confidence score is 100% is because what I put in is exactly matching the question that I have inside my Q&A Maker instance, okay? And this serves to kind of highlight something. And what it highlights is the fact that Q&A Maker utilizes natural language automatically, right? It takes natural language into account when it is taking all of your knowledge base in and then putting it inside its system. And that's one of the reasons why it works so well. It works so well because you don't have to have multiple examples of your questions. It definitely helps, but Q&A Maker is smart enough to try to make that determination and figure out what it is that your audience is asking you, okay? That's why it's so powerful. So one of the other things that we can do is we can add alternate phrasing in here, okay? Now, what we asked before is so in this case, I'm now adding alternate phrasing in here to add that piece that I asked before, okay? Now, one of the things that I have to do in order to get this thing to work is to save and train, okay? Now, this is really important for anybody who is going to be utilizing any type of AI by Microsoft. If you find that some of the changes that you make don't seem to be like sticking, it's probably because you haven't saved and trained it, okay? Okay. Or the demo gods are just not kind. Let's try it again. There we go. Now it's 100%. Okay. So what this showcased is now that that alternate phrasing is part of this question, the confidence score is now 100%. Okay. And the more data that I continue to give this particular question, the more ways that I'm going to be able to ask it and get the answer that I'm looking for. Again, it's that care and feeding bit that I'm going to be able to, that's going to be able to get my knowledge base to be that much more accurate. Okay, so that's test. So now let's say that we want to create a brand new knowledge-based question. So how would we do that? So what we need to do is we need to come up here and we need to do add Q&A pair. And let's put in the question, how do okay. And let's put in an answer. And it gives you kind of this nifty little, advanced text piece where it doesn't have to be just simple text, because a lot of the times this is all displayed on a website, and I'll be showing that to you a little bit later. So what do we want to put for this? This could possibly be the child of another question, right? So let's look over here and let's do an add follow-up prompt. And then we are given this lovely modal. Actually, before we do that, let's just make it a regular answer. With cleaner. There. So now let's save and train. So this is our base case. This is our easiest. I'm adding something to the knowledge base. How do I clean my whiteboard? You clean it with cleaner. So test. Okay, right? How do I clean my whiteboard? You clean it with cleaner. Okay, so it even took a little variation of what I was looking for. Not exactly how do I clean my whiteboard. I clean it with cleaner. Now, so that's a single answer. Let's make it a multi-answer. So if I come in here, I can make it a multi-answer by clicking this add follow-up prompt. Okay, so my add follow-up prompt is essentially, if I get an answer back, I want to be able to go one more step down to another answer. So the display text is the display that shows up on the button, right? Because when you have a follow-up prompt, it's going to appear as a button. And let's put in, let's put in, now, once we have the display text, obviously that's going to be the text on the button. Then what we want to do is we want to link it to another Q&A maker row. So, for example, I could hypothetically link it to "Do you get hurt?" but that wouldn't really make any sense. But we want to search for something. What this does is it allows us to search for another Q&A maker row that we might want to link it to. So what do we want to search for? Let's try searching for Microsoft Whiteboard. Okay. It's kind of like cleaning it. Sounds good. Let's click this off. All right, and let's save. Okay, so now notice a couple things. Notice over here on the context side, we now have our kind of multi-step piece over here. We still have our top level question. We can add alternate phrasing. That's not going to take until I do a save and train, which I'm not going to do yet. But I can do a test. Oh, yes, I know I have unsaved. Apparently, it's going to make me save and train it. All right, let's do a test. So we get the answer that we're looking for, and we get a button that allows us to drill into the next piece, right? Which is exactly what we're looking for. It's a multi-level. Now, one of the things that we saw here is this ability to, if we go and try to create a new one, and let's make it, let's make the question, can I use Windex? On my whiteboard. That's not how to spell Windex. Windex. Anybody who's in that company here, I apologize. Can I use Windex on my whiteboard? The answer is no. Okay, so we can add an additional one in here if we wanted by simply coming in here and adding another follow-up prompt. Okay, now if we click this off, I want to showcase to you what's going to happen. We may need to save and train before. Yep, we do. Stand by. There it is. Context only. Okay, so now with context only, what exactly did that do? So you saw before, so now you see how this says context only on it. You saw before when I tested it, I was able to say that, can I use Windex on my whiteboard? But if I say now, it doesn't actually answer it. Okay, and so I see there's a question in chat. I'll get that to that in 1 minute, Ryan. So what did that do? Okay, there are going to be times where you're going to have sub-questions that you do not want to be able to be asked as a top-level question, right? So in this case, can I use Windex on my whiteboard? I don't want someone to be able to ask that at a top level. And that's why this context-only bit is important. So I can only get to this piece if I go through, how do I clean my whiteboard? So if I do right? So how do I clean my whiteboard? Can we clean it like this? And then no. So I essentially got to this answer, but the only way I could get to this answer is through context. That's the difference, and that's what that little check mark does. I'm one of those people who's super fastidious about when I'm using a tool, I need to know what every single thing does. So that's why I try to go over everything. So in chat, Ryan said, I understand that care and feeding is required. However, is there a more automated way of creating the alternate phrasing? For example, is there ability to easily see a list of all the questions that the bot was unable to answer during a period and essentially link them without having to go search for a correct answer and manually type in the alternate way of asking? So Ryan, not out of the box. There is not, unfortunately. But we have actually created, many a custom solution for people who are trying to achieve just that, because the question that you asked is not an uncommon one. Many times people will say, oh, wow, I got this great Power BI report, except that now I have to go in and manually type everything. So one of the great things about Q&A Maker and pretty much any cognitive service is that they all are exposed. They all expose APIs, right? So we actually had a situation where we had a client that did not want to log into QAMaker.ai. They wanted their own interface. So we built them all their own interface to do all of this. And part of that interface was the ability to essentially just click on a phrase that was unknown and just say, oh, attach it to this question, attach it to that question. And we had recommendations as well. So we actually we created an AI model that would say, oh, well, we kind of recommend it goes here. And then you just had to say, yep, that looks good. So it's definitely can be done, but it's not out of the box. So hopefully that answers your question. I think you gave me a thumbs up, so I think it does. So, long story short, yeah, I wish they had an easy button. So long story short, what essentially you're doing here is you are nurturing a knowledge base. And through nurturing that knowledge base, you are creating a bot that is able to answer all of these questions. And if you really think about it, I know that even in the explanation that I just gave, it's like, oh man, I got to do that myself. But you have to think about what you're getting for essentially, I started talking about this at 1. We've essentially built a whole knowledge base, and I built it in 20 minutes. And the rest of the 40 minutes, I've just been talking about it. And this knowledge base is quite extensive. In fact, we tried to test the limits of it once. I think I pulled in like hundreds of thousands of questions from the Home Depot website for just FAQs. And we had this bot that could answer like all these different questions. And in a matter of like 20 minutes, we were able to get this bot up and running without having to program a thing. So you got to think of kind of like, it's getting you 90% of the way there. So having to do that other little bit while can be tedious is a lot easier than, can't believe I'm about to say this, but in the olden days when you had to do everything by hand, right? And having had to do that in the olden days, I can tell you that this is a dream, right? So, and I could also say to you that improvements will continue to be made, right? And I guarantee that probably in a year or two, I'll be doing one of these webinars where I'll be showcasing that exact feature that you just asked about. So I have no doubt. So A couple of different other things that we can do inside this screen. So we talked about editing, and I pretty much have covered almost every single bell and whistle here, except with view options, which is pretty much just kind of self-explanatory. How many you got to view per page, if you want to collapse all the sources, so on and so forth. Let's talk about settings for a minute. So settings are kind of just this ability to change a little bit of some of the things that we set up in the initial Q&A maker configuration. So this ability to, this is where you would go to add files and URLs to your knowledge base. So again, if you want to, if there's a new FAQ that you want to add, you can go ahead and add it here. There's a new document that you want to upload, you would add it here. One of the other cool things that you can do is export and import knowledge bases. Now, you wouldn't think that this feature is really that great, but I can tell you that it is a lifesaver, especially in my line of business where we constantly have to be creating different environments for both demo and production. So for example, you would want to mirror your production environment with your demo environment. And so how would you do that, right? You wouldn't want to have to go through the methodology of importing and editing all that stuff. You simply would export it from your original environment now into your production environment. And you would test out some of the different things that you'd want to import into your demo, and then you would move it over through export and import. So you would do that. Share knowledge base. Essentially what you're doing is you're allowing other people in your Azure instance to be able to log into here and make changes. Deployment details. So one of the things once we deploy this, of which we are going to, the Q&A maker is a service, right? And as a service, you can call it via an API, right? So I literally can go into a tool like Postman or even through a web browser and call it, and I would get back some JSON. So I could call it with a question and I would get back some JSON. And this is what allows us to be so flexible about how it gets used, right? I could maybe even create a mobile app that utilizes this service and is able to bring back data and to be able to do it. And this is the functionality that allows me to utilize this service inside Power Virtual Agents, right? And that's what we're going to talk about when we move on to the next demo, utilizing the Q&A maker service when, within stuff like that. The other thing to talk about is publishing, right? So at some point you are going to be done with creating your knowledge base and you're going to want to publish it. So we talked about, oh my God, we have this big fear of publishing. And what am I going to do once I need to publish something? Well, your friends at Microsoft have tried to make things as simple as possible. And bam, it's published. It's literally clicking a button. I don't know how much simpler it could be. So you have essentially now published your service. Now, what you're going to say to me is, wait a minute, where's my bot? And you would not be wrong in asking me that question. But this is the point where I tell you that your Q&A maker service is not a bot. Your Q&A maker service is a service that your bot can use, right? So that's a really important distinction, because if you remember when we were testing, it looked like a bot, right? So I was able to type in questions and I was able to get back answers. And someone who did not look at this webinar and came in here and was trying things and published it and was like, wait a minute, I published it. Like, I don't understand. I'm supposed to be getting a bot from this. Don't worry, you can, right? We have to click this create a bot button. So you're not quite there yet, but you will be. That's an important distinction to make, because you've just created a service, but you haven't created a bot to use that service yet. So when I hit create a bot, I come in here and we see this familiar, I'm going to create a new Azure instance. Oh my God, I don't want to have to deal with this again. But luckily, This time, most of the stuff is already kind of put in for us, right? It's given us a bot handle, it's given us a subscription, it's given us a resource group, all of this stuff. The only thing we really have to choose is a pricing tier. I'm going to try free. We'll see if it lets me have it. And I'm going to hit create. Yep, I figured it was going to be. So what just happened there is it told me that the bot's name was already taken, which I kind of knew it was going to be because when I wrote the script for this, that was what I named it. So now what it's doing is it's creating our bot. It's creating our bot in Azure, and it's deploying it out for us. So this is the secret sauce behind, creating a bot that utilizes Q&A Maker. Now, this does not use Power Virtual Agents because in the Microsoft world, there are many different ways to accomplish the same task. And you're going to find in programming that's always true, right? Power Virtual Agents is one way to create a bot. You also could utilize a tool called Bot Framework Composer, which is another way to create a bot. You also could do it completely from scratch utilizing the Bot Framework SDK, which is another way. So what I just did there is I just clicked Go to Resource, which went to the resource that I created inside my Azure subscription. And you see up there on the left, it says Web App Bot. So this is my actual bot that is housed inside my Azure subscription. And I know that at this point, you're like, oh my God, what are all these things? I don't know, what all this stuff does. What am I supposed to click? What do I not click? All of those things. Okay, don't worry. There's only a few things that really matter on this page. And a lot of the other stuff is completely superfluous that you'll never, ever have to touch. In fact, most of the time when I come in here, I don't even touch it. So the thing that matters the most is this thing called channels. So let's click channels. So remember how I told you that bots are deployed onto channels. So these are all the different channels that are available inside of our bot, okay? Now, at the top, you will see that our bot has actually already been deployed on a channel, the web chat channel, okay? So what we want to do is click that. And this showcases for us what we would need to do in order to use our bot on a channel, on the web channel, right? So again, the web channel being, I'm on a website. Remember, you have that little bot that's in the corner and all of that stuff. So this is what that would be. So how do we kind of see how this works? So luckily, there is a way in which we can kind of preview a little bit about getting this stuff working. And the way in which we do it is there is a code that we need called this embed code. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of HTML here, and I promise you it is not a lot, and it's super easy. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to open up Notepad. And I am going to create a little bit of HTML. First, I'm going to take the code that I grabbed right from here, and I'm going to put it in there, okay? Then I'm going to take some other HTML that I just kind of pre-wrote. This is unbelievably simple, right? I have an open HTML tag, a closed HTML tag. And between there, I have a head tag and a title, which basically just titles my page. And inside the body, that's where I put the bot code. Now, in order for this to work, I need to put my secret in. So it says your secret here, okay? And in order to get that, I need to grab this. This is my secret. So I'm going to grab this, and they give you two. You only need one. paste that in there. Okay. So I'm going to save this guy. And I'm going to save him as so now he's saved. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up this HTML page. Now, what you're going to see is my bot. Bot says hello and welcome, right? Okay. So now we can come in and we can start typing things and we can start interacting with our bot. So now I'm going to say something. Now you're going to notice that the bot is not really going to respond the way that I'm thinking it's going to respond. I say hi, it says hello. Now let's pick a question from our Q&A Maker knowledge base. So when I click my knowledge bases, it goes to all the different knowledge bases that I have inside my subscription. So this is the one that we created together. So do you get heard? Let's pick that one. Okay. So what it's doing right now is it's pulling from this knowledge base. Let's pick let's see. Let's go over here. Customize your pen. Okay, so this is an actual bot. The HTML page is not published, but the bot is. Okay, so I could hypothetically take this code and I could put it on a published HTML page and I would get this window. Okay, now this window, obviously, you know, like I was saying before, it's not what I'm expecting because I'm expecting that little icon on the bottom right. All of that is, you know, UX that can be done. All I'm trying to accomplish here is showcasing to you that I can actually, you know, I can actually talk to the bot and the bot will talk back to me. Okay, so we have accomplished what we're setting out to accomplish. We've created a bot. That bot is connected to our Q&A resource, and that Q&A resource comes from an FAQ that we have created and that we have imported in. Now, if I want to update that resource, right? Let's say, right? So I put in some kind of crazy question there. Now, right now, if I were to ask that question, it would come back as nothing, right? So even though I've saved and trained it. Okay, sorry, I can't do that. Now, the reason it comes back as nothing, even though I've saved and trained it, is because I have to republish it. Ads are kind to me. This should. Okay. So, change your knowledge base, republish. You now have different functionality. Okay. So that sums up Q&A Maker. It is extremely powerful, and in the time frame of, you know, an hour and 10 minutes roughly, we were able to create a bot. We were able to deploy it and publish it out. And, you know, I could come in here hypothetically and I can deploy it to different channels if I wanted to. If I close this, I could deploy it to Facebook. I could deploy it to Skype, Slack, whatever. When you go to deploy, one of the cool things that you can do with this, when you go to deploy to some of these things is, remember how I talked about with Microsoft, a lot of times they walk you through things. With some of these learn more things, they have these step-by-step processes of, okay, what do? I got to connect the bot to Facebook Messenger. Do this, then go grab page ID, then do this. And they even give you all these images, right? And that's something that, for me, even as a developer, was really helpful the first time around because, you know, if you've ever used Facebook in a developer sense before, it can be extremely complicated. The other thing I wanted to show you really quick before I end this session on here is you can test your bot out right here in the portal. Right? So that's the great thing about doing things in the portal too. I didn't actually even have to create an HTML page. One is right here for me that I can go and test. Okay, but I wanted to create one to show you that putting that HTML on there connects live into the bot. So that's Q&A Maker. So let's switch back real quick to next up. We're going to be talking about Power Virtual Agents. Matt, I don't think we need another break unless you want to take one. If you're there, or Gina.
Matt, I'm here. I think you can totally keep going if you want, or you can take a 5-minute break.
Okay. Why don't we take an 8-minute break until 2:20, so I can grab some more water, and then we'll come back and we'll cover Power Virtual Agents.
Perfect.
I think he's a great.
Okay, about one more minute and we'll get ourselves going. On what I'm determining is to be the main event we all came here for, Power Virtual Agents. As I was saying before we get started, there are many different ways to kind of slice this apple. PVA is just the closest to the low-code, no-code version, but there's also Bot Framework Composer, which is kind of, and as you start to go from low-code, no-code over to developer, the tools kind of go like Power Virtual Agents to Bot Framework Composer to pure SDK, meaning like you're opening up code and you're writing it that way. So there's really, and the great thing is they all kind of connect with each other. So you actually can open up Bot Framework Composer inside Power Virtual Agents. So Microsoft's really done a great job of kind of seamlessly connecting all the different ones. So there is a question. I've been following along is the time it takes for employment or publishing, etc., normal in Azure. It's taking longer than I expect as the size of the bot affect the processing time. Sometimes it affects it, but the deployment time shouldn't be that much. You know, it also depends, it honestly depends on the state of Azure at that moment. I've had things that have very small payloads take much longer than expected. I've had things with large payloads be very quick. It really, it's kind of a crapshoot. But I've never had anything take like inordinately long. It's usually like 30 seconds at the most. You know, it also really depends as far as bots are concerned. You know, when I've been building other things, you know, it takes longer. You know, entire applications or databases or things of that nature. But for bots, it's usually pretty quick. If you're finding it's taking longer, then there might be some other force at play. So. Okay. We're going to get ourselves going and talk about Power Virtual Agents. So this is literally the only slide I have on it because we're going to jump right in to PVA. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a browser to powerva.microsoft.com. So if we do that, it actually leads me right to this page. But that's like the official URL of Power Virtual Agents. So now, so you can just continue to ask questions. I'll stop briefly and continue to answer them. Don't let the fact that I've started inhibit you. I love questions. So so this is going to bring you to the main Power Virtual Agents homepage. Now, remember that PVA is part of the Power Platform suite, and that Power Platform is a subscription-based model service from Microsoft. So if you aren't able to access this page, or you see something about like signing up, you may need to do that or contact your Office 365 admin before you're able to create bots. It's important to note that there's a difference here between an Azure subscription and an Office 365 subscription. And I just want to make that clear. So this is part of your Office 365 subscription. So, and most of the time when you try to sign into stuff like this, it will lead you through with menus and prompts. And there's a 30-day trial as well with the Power Platform. So if you just want to try it and see if you like it, you can. So, and again, I think they have specialized stuff for education and things of that sort. So you should be pretty golden if you just want to try it. But once you do that, you're able to access this page. You'll have the ability to create brand new bots. So I'm going to come up here into the upper right-hand corner, and this little thing that looks like a bot, and I'm going to click it. And that's going to give me this nice little slide out menu. That's going to give me a couple of different options. Now, the first one is going to be environment. Now, the environment is our Azure tenant. Now, if you don't know what that is, don't worry. Most of you will have exactly one of these, and they will not have to worry about this dropdown at all. I have multiple because I'm a consultant and I am attached to many different Azure tenants. So other companies have attached me to their tenant, but you know, if I wasn't a consultant, I'd probably just have one. If you remember subscriptions from our previous video, it's one above subscriptions. So tenant, subscriptions, service, okay? So I'm just gonna leave this Talon by default, and because we're gonna do all of our work in the Talon tenant. Is there an agent or tool that could be used to integrate with a website search feature? Let me get back to you on that, Ryan, because I'll probably need a little bit more clarification on that question. So we can talk more once I hit the end of this. So next, we have our bot list, right? So down here on the right, I'm used to being able to draw with all of my different courses I have. But over here, we have our bot list. They teach you when you're doing courses never to use your mouse as a pointer, but obviously when you're doing it live, you have to. So, so over here I have my bot list. So these are all the different bots that I've kind of created inside this tenant. So once we create a bot, it's going to be featured on this list. Of course, the real button that we're concerned about is this one up here called New Bot. So we're going to click that. That's going to bring up this nifty little modal window where we have 3 property boxes. The first is where we get to name our bot. I'm going to call this one Henderson Chatbot Event Bot. And then it's going to ask me what its language is, which will be English. Sorry for all you Dutch speakers out there. I know you were rooting for that one. And then finally, we have environment again, which we're just going to default to Talon. So hit create, and then magic is happening. So what this tells us is that Microsoft is, building our bot in the background, and it's provisioning all the things that it needs to provision, and it's creating all the different Power Virtual Agent subscriptions and pieces that we need to. So it's still doing that now, but one of the cool things is that while it's doing the other things it needs to do, it's done enough so that we can start to work, right? So let's go ahead and click this X. We don't need you anymore. We actually just want to start doing stuff. So we get a page that's very similar to the one you saw when we actually logged into this page, except that it's for our new bot rather than the bot that kind of you get by default. And it's loading all the stuff because it just finished doing all the stuff in the background, so that's why I just refreshed. So let's talk a little bit about this page because we kind of glossed over it when we first got here previously. So over here on the right-hand window, so this big guy right here, we just have a kind of couple of pieces of information that we can click on and get documentation and to move us to different parts of the application. Publish a bot, test a bot. If I hit test a bot, it'll bring us to the testing piece. Publish a bot, it'll bring us to this publish piece. Things like that. And then I can learn more here. I don't have to learn more because you have me. So don't worry about that for now. Then over here on this window, we have the ability to actually test the bot. We saw a little bit of this same type of feature when we were doing our Q&A maker stuff where the thing slid out on the right. So this will allow us to test it in real time. So we can actually just try this out now. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so essentially this is kind of the out-of-the-box stuff we get with a brand new bot. It just says, hey, I'm a virtual agent. I can help you with doing some of this stuff. And then it actually says, if you'd like to speak to a human agent, let me know at any time. What can I help you with today? So I want to ask the audience, and just think about yourself because you can't really answer me. Oh, I guess you couldn't chat, but just think about it for yourselves. What rule of UX is this kind of breaking, right? In my mind, it's breaking that rule where it's not leading the customer, right? So yeah, it kind of says I can help with account question, orders, and store information and more, but it doesn't really give you the words that we would need to put in order to kind of get that information, right? So you right away, it's kind of breaking some of those traditional UX rules. So that's one thing I don't really like about some of the out-of-the-box functionality. The other piece of functionality that you'll notice is this ability to speak to a human agent. And this is one of the things that you're going to find in the bot world that is really prevalent and that gets utilized quite a bit, is this ability to do what's called a human handoff. A human handoff is really important because at some point, it is inevitable that your bot is not going to know what to do. I hope that's not a surprise to anyone. You could work on the bot for the next 100 years, and eventually someone is going to figure out something to say to it where it's going to hit a wall. And the best thing you can do for your bot is to try to program in a scenario where it can hand it off to a live person. right? And there are many different ways to handle that scenario. Some scenarios are, oh, I'll set up an email for you and someone will get back to you, right? That's technically a handoff. But some of the more sophisticated ones are, I will literally hand you off to someone, right? So the bot goes away, an actual person starts typing. And I've actually designed systems before where that happens. Literally, I've created a dashboard where someone will get a text message. They'll say, hey, someone's waiting to talk to you. They turn the bot off and they start typing. And the whole thing happens seamlessly where they don't even have to open another window. Literally, it's just the bot turns off and the person starts talking to the person, right? So this happens so often that Microsoft has built-in functionality for it. So it's an important concept to just be aware of. So let me just try something else. So, okay, so I'm just typing things. It's just giving me back, random whatever. Now, you would think that this is a brand new bot and there's no functionality pre-programmed here, and it just always kind of defaults to, hey, I don't know. And that would kind of be a valid assumption, right? And as we've seen, this bot kind of suffers from that UX sin that we talked about, and it doesn't actually tell us what we can ask, so we need to guess. But luckily, since we're in the designer, we actually can cheat. And we can cheat by coming down here to our topics category. You may have seen right there, it says composer is moved. I mentioned a little bit on the break that Power Virtual Agents can call into Composer, and Composer is kind of that middle ground between a citizen developer and a pure developer, right? So it can connect in. So that's just kind of a little footnote there. So, so if we look over here on the right, over here, we can see all the different things that we can ask our bot and some of the various trigger phrases that would cause some of these topics to appear. So let's try one of these on our bot. So the first one says, when are you closed? So let's type that in. I don't know if you can see that. It's really small, but I'll read it to you. You have to trust me on this one. Okay, so as you can see, we get a different response, right? When I was throwing up tests and stuff and whatever. Topics, as we see here, are the primary way that you can define ways your bots can interact with your users. Now, looking at this list, we see that the ones we get for free are divided here into two different types, delineated by these little icons here on the left, right? So these are two different icon types. There are 8 topics down here that are system topics, that are more generic topics like greeting and goodbye, that are kind of universal for all bots. And then there are 4 up here at the top that we have that are user-defined examples that are kind of more throwaways, because if you are not running a restaurant or some kind of store that has hours 9 to 6, then you really don't care about having hours in there, but it's more of just an example, right? So they're really just there to kind of demonstrate how some of that stuff works. So we have 3 other columns here to help define each topic. Name, which is kind of fairly obvious. There's a column called trigger phrases, which we already kind of seen what it is, but it's basically what we have to say in order to get a topic to work. So think of it like kind of the questions in the Q&A maker piece. Now you'll notice that each of these has a little number associated with it. And that's how many trigger phrases are associated with that particular topic. So if we click on them, you actually can see all the different ones that we have. So before it just said 4, now you can see the 4 that are all the different trigger phrases. So in the case of the first one, we have when you're closed, when you open, store hours, and daily open hours, right? So if we said any of these, we would have gotten the same one. So let's say store hours. Okay, exact same one. Now, in order to get our trigger, it's not exactly about the exact phrase, because up until now, I've been putting in the exact phrase. And, from the original slides, you're probably thinking to yourself, Matt, you're promising this magical wonderland where you don't have to use the exact phrase, and you can say, hello, hola, what's up, and it will, understand that you mean hi. And that's certainly true here. PVA uses AI and natural language in order to interpret what the user is asking and make the best possible guess for one of these topics. It's the same way that it did when we have our Q&A maker service. We get this functionality for free. So instead of saying, when are you open, let's ask, what time do you open? And of course, the demo gods hate me. Okay, let's ask. Demo gods do not like me today. There we go. Okay. What are the store hours? Okay. So if I put that in, then it would all seem magical. So as you can tell, sometimes the natural language needs a little push. Okay, and that's where the Karen feeding comes in. Okay, so if I wanted to make this smarter, what would I do? Okay, entering hours will also work. Right, so what would I do? This is actually a good teaching moment. What would I do if I wanted to make this smarter? I would add more trigger phrases. So if I add in more trigger phrases, then the bot would have more data to draw from to make a better choice as to what topic I really meant in order to get closer to being able to guess. Okay, so because there's only 4 trigger phrases, it has a very limited data set in order to make that determination. So because I said, what are the store hours? There was enough data there in order to be able to guess, okay, well, it really meant store hours, which actually meant less than 1, a simple topic. Okay, makes sense? So the bad news is it's not, super smart right off the bat. The good news is that 4 trigger phrases is actually below the recommended amount of trigger phrases that you should have when you start a new trigger, which is actually 10. So take that. So finally, we have this little status button. There we go. Okay, status button, which will essentially turn this trigger on and off. So let us turn this trigger off. Now, when I was doing this for the first time, I was like, why isn't this thing turning off? And then I saw this little piece up here. So you got to be patient with it, right? So it is turning off, but it's a service, right? So it's contacting an API. The API is updating the model. The model needs to rebuild itself and then come back, okay? So let's ask again. Okay, and that one should have worked, right? When are you closed is exactly what we asked. So in this case, it actually asked me for clarification. So why did it do that? Now, this is interesting here. The reason it did that is because there are 2 or more topics that are close enough that that the AI does not know which one you want. Okay, and this will happen sometimes. So instead of it basically picking one and possibly picking the wrong one, it gives you a choice. And in this case, it's none of these, right? Because it's not the one that I want. It's because that one's off. So if I turn it on again, and then I try it again, I get it. Okay, simple, status on and off. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new topic for our bot because all these topics, I don't like them. So we do that by coming up here to the top and clicking this new topic button. I know you're all wowed by that name and the approach. Okay, let's put in something that's quite relevant in today's day and age, which is COVID. Okay, so we're going to have our name be COVID, and our friendly name is just that, the name that we can present to the world if we need to ask if this topic is the topic that we want to talk about. Now, this is optional, but in this case, we can simply use COVID questions. A description is fairly self-explanatory. Okay, let's move on to trigger phrases. Now, in this scenario, we want to capture anything that might indicate to the bot that the person talking to it thinks they might have COVID or are worried about symptoms of COVID. So let's put in some trigger phrases around that. Let's start with the simple, do I have COVID? And let's add a few more. Now, like I said, each topic really, it says 5 to 10 diverse phrases. Okay, I told you 10 before. I was going on the high end of the spectrum. Okay, the other one, I think I had 4. But anyway, 5 should be enough for our purposes here. Okay, so once we've done that, we can click this little button over here called Go to Authoring Canvas. And this is kind of really where the magic happens. And this is, there was a comment before about how understanding logic really kind of helps with programming and especially bot development. And that is really going to show through here, okay? Because when you're developing bots, especially this way in a visual environment, it really is about a workflow. And workflow is really just about logically understanding how we got from A to B, right? And if you can understand how we got from A to B easily, then you're really there, right? And it's just about utilizing the tools at hand. And the tools at hand are, they're pretty straightforward. Microsoft's done a really great job of making things really easy to utilize in this environment. So if you know how to think logically, you're really kind of halfway there. So what it's going to do here, it's saved our topic choices, and it's going to open up this thing called the authoring canvas. And this is where we construct what happens after the bot recognizes that a topic has been chosen. Now, notice that when we asked about, notice what we're asked about when we open. The bot took us through a series of steps, including asking us trigger phrases, right? So basically, it's showcasing to us, these are all the things that are going to need to happen in order to trigger this message, okay? So what do we want to do here? What do we want to happen when some of these trigger phrases happen, okay? Just a couple of things first. We can go back into the details screen by clicking this details button. So just the idea to go back and forth. And then if we come down here to message box, if there's something wrong or it's providing an error, it's going to try to showcase to you right here on the canvas, and it's also going to show you right up here in this little topic checker, okay? So it's going to showcase to you errors and warnings. And this can also be really good if like your bot's not functioning for some reason and you're like, I don't understand why. If you click it, it actually will bring you right to where the problem is, or it's going to do its best, right? So let's put in something here. Let's say definitely want to spell things right because it's a very professional COVID bot. Okay. So, hi, I can definitely help you with some information about COVID symptoms and easy ways to test for it that I can even do for you right now. So this is what the bot is going to respond to the user with if they initiate any of those trigger phrases, okay? So let's click this little universal sign for saving, which is the disk up here. So now our topic is saved, and now we can try it. Now notice on here, there's no notion of saving and training, right? It's just saving, okay? So. Okay, notice a few things happen. First of all, we got our message. Yay, score. But second, notice all the parts of the conversation that got hit have a green check mark on them. Now, of course, all of them that got hit here are kind of already are checked off because there was only really 2, right? But we need to add some things to change that, because if you have multiple different ways a conversation can go in a flow, some will get checked off and some will not. Now, this feature by in and of itself is not prevalent in some of the other tools that Microsoft has. So when I saw it here, it was surprisingly cool, right? And when you're trying to test something out, especially when you have bots that are wildly complex, this can be really a lifesaver. And understanding the flow of how bots go, especially when you're going from topic to topic to topic, which we're going to do in a minute, it can be really helpful. So let's add a little bit more complexity to our bot. So at the end of the message here, let's ask a question. So how do we do that? We need to click this little plus button. And once we click this little plus button, we simply do ask a question. And all I'm doing here is I get a brand new menu. I had a brand new menu with the different things I could ask, right? So our question is going to be, are you ready to get started? Okay, we're going to put that question in that little box right there. And after that, we're going to have a multitude of different options that we can consider. The first is to identify this little identify drop-down box. Okay. And what this does is it helps to identify the user's response. Now, of course, we could just allow for like a free-form response. So if I click this, we could just allow the user to enter, whatever they want, right? But that's really kind of a lot harder to work with programmatically, and we've kind of already shown that that's kind of one of those UX sins. So I want to kind of select one of the other options. So let's kind of look at them, right? So one of them we have is this idea of multiple choice options, and that's the one we're ultimately going to pick. But I want to go over some of the other ones here. User's entire response, that's just the free-for-all, right? That's enter whatever you want and I'll take it. And some of the other ones here are age, Boolean, so yes or no, city, color, continent, country or region, duration, so a length of time, email, event, event like birthday, Christmas, type of language, so English, Dutch, Spanish, organization, percentage. So all of these different things, you might be asking yourself, like, how does a PVA understand like what a continent name is, or what specific, what an email string is, or what languages are, or what type of money is. So this ties into Lewis, okay? And Lewis, because it's built on natural language, has this concept of an entity, right? An entity is kind of this idea of what I call a capitalized word, right? So think of it like this. If I'm talking about a person and I use a person's name, right? So Matt, right? I am an entity, right? I'm a very specific person. Matt Krusick, that's a very specific person. That's an entity, okay? A continent is a very specific thing. USA, very specific continent, right? So Lewis is smart enough to know all of those things. It's smart enough to know what money looks like. What, if I put $, figure, dot, whatever, it knows that that's money. So all of that knowledge is pre-programmed into Lewis, and it can read and understand all of that stuff. And because you have all that power behind it, what does that give you? It gives you validation, majorly, right? So if you pick money here and you throw in, let's say blue, the color blue, it's probably going to say to you, hey, blue is not money, right? So that's one thing. Here's another thing. Let's say I put time in there, right? And time, I could say 5 p.m. is essentially a time, but also is noon. Noon is a time, right? And because this is built in Lewis and is attached to natural language, Lewis understands that noon is actually 12 p.m. So it's able to take that and kind of massage it and put it into a figure that we can understand in programming and utilize. So that's kind of the skinny on these. So it's actually a lot more powerful than it looks at first glance. So we're going to choose multiple choice, which is what was there originally. And it's not as fun or as interesting as some of those other ones that I described, but this is the one that we're gonna go with for now. Actually, you know what? We won't go with that one. We'll go with Boolean. Okay, so the reason why we're going to go with Boolean, I thought we were going to go with multiple choice before because we're, true or false, but Boolean actually makes more sense here. So we're going to go with Boolean because are you ready to get started is just a true or false question, right? Am I ready to get started? Yes or no? Okay, so what did that do? Okay, now down here as the save a response as, it created a variable for us because anytime that user has a response, we need to save it into a variable because that allows us to utilize it later in our flow. So let's click this little pencil for a minute. So in here, it shows the properties of that variable. And right off the bat, it's given it the most boring name in the world, which is var. So it kind of sucks. So let's change that. Let's change that to should start, which is so much more interesting than var. It tells us the type down here, right here under type, which is Boolean, which we kind of knew. So there's really no surprise there. Then we have this go to source, okay, which will bring us to the box that is the source of the variable. Now, in this case, it doesn't really make sense because we are currently at the source of the variable. But the property screen is available in many different other screens, right? So if we're utilizing this variable on a different topic and we click this go to source, it will bring us back to this question, okay? That can be extremely powerful because one of the things that you have to think about when you're building some of these bots is this may seem superfluous at the time because you're like, God, why do I need that? But you also have to think that a bot is going to get more and more complex as time marches on. And you always have to be thinking about that complexity and what that complexity is going to mean for you later on. So this is one of those things that while you probably won't use now, you will be using more later on. Okay, so for usage, this helps to set the scope of the variable. Sometimes we want our variables to persist past the topic. For example, let's say in this topic, I want to ask the user their name. That is a fact that I like to possibly be able to use elsewhere. So I might want other topics to be able to access that. Then finally, we have this used by piece, right? Which is tells us which dialog pieces use our variable. Right now, no one uses it, so of course it is a big fat goose egg. So let's close this up because that's what we want, and let's click this plus button again. And the next one we're going to do is add a condition. So as the name implies, a condition is a divergence in the path into multiple paths based on, you guessed it, a condition. That condition is going to be the value inside our should start variable, which is set with this question, are you ready to get started, right? So we get asked this question, this saves in here. Once we set that action, we are presented with two boxes rather. One saying, this is for the condition, and this is for all other conditions. Okay, so let's look at the first one first, the one on the left. So in here, we select the variable, the only variable we have, which is should start. And then we need to select the value. Okay, so this is the value that we are going to, that needs to equal in order to set this condition. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say when should start is equal to true, go down this path. And since it's a Boolean, all other conditions are going to be when it's equal to false. Okay, so now we've covered both sides of the equation here. So if the user's answer is true, it's going to go down this side, otherwise it's going to go down that side. Now on the false path, let's put a message saying, so we're going to show a message that says, okay, no problem. Okay. Nice, friendly, thanks for playing, have a nice day, answer. Okay, so let's save that. Let's test it again. Now, if I just put in COVID, it knows what I'm talking about, right? Because it's the only topic that mentions COVID. So, am I ready to get started? No, I'm not. And notice the green check marks, right? It brought me down the path that I was looking for. Now, at this point, I want to mention these little boxes here, okay, and what these do. So, these are canvas controls, and these help to zoom in and zoom out of my canvas, because as my canvas becomes more and more polluted, I am going to have to kind of navigate my way around. And sometimes I want to see more of kind of what I'm looking at, and sometimes I want to see less of what I'm looking at. So that's these, and this recenters it. Okay, so that's those three. Now, this one gives me a nice little mini map of the whole thing, so I can kind of move myself around of everything. And this one is probably the coolest one of the bunch, is a variable watch, right? So in this case, I can watch every single variable throughout my flow, and I can know what it is at any given moment, right? At the end of my flow, my should start variable is false, right? Because when I got asked this question, it got set to false and it led me down this path, okay? So those are extremely useful, especially this variables one. I basically have this one on almost all the time when I'm working. So what happens if the user says yes? What do we want to do? All right, well, let's ask a couple of questions. So how do we do that? Let's put plus button, ask a couple of questions. And the first questions we're going to want to ask are just some general questions to get some information about the person. Let's put in a message saying as such. All right, so jump the gun a little bit there. Let's just tell them. Super excited to start off with some general questions. This bot just really wants to help you out. Okay. Now, we could simply put the questions in a flow just like this, and there really would be nothing wrong with that, okay? But this, again, brings me back to the idea of thinking about what your bot's going to be in the future, and thinking about your bot getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and what it could possibly be, and planning for that. So I could continue to add questions just like this, but I'm not going to. And the reason I'm not going to is because there is a best practice that I can do that allows me to modularize topics of conversation so that I can have things be a lot more compartmentalized. And this helps me out in a lot of different ways. It helps me out so that I can reuse aspects of conversation across multiple different workflows. And it makes things less, monolithic, so that when I need to change something, I don't have to rely on these controls so as much. So I have to zoom so far out to see everything. Okay. So let's create a new topic. So we come back over here. I'm going to save it. And then let's come back over here to topics after we're saved. And create a new one. And we're going to call this general. And I'm not even going to bother putting a friendly name or a description. And I'm not going to put in any trigger phrases. And the reason I'm not going to put in any trigger phrases is because I don't want people to be able to get to this topic from a top level. Okay? This is kind of synonymous to that context based question in the Q&A maker piece. I only want to be able to call this as a sub dialogue. Okay? So in order to do that, I basically just don't include any trigger phrases. Okay, so go away. First thing I want to do is I want to ask a question. I want to say, what is there? Okay, perfectly reasonable question. And for response, we want to grab the person's whole response. So under this circumstance, grabbing the user's entire response makes sense, right? Because it's just the person's name, and there's really no other way to slice it, right? So for a variable, sorry, var, we don't like you, we're going to call this simply name, okay? So after that, we're going to ask another question. And although you're not supposed to ask this on an interview, we're going to ask it here. Capitalize H. Okay, so now we're going to ask age. Okay, and you guessed it, the variable is going to be age. And we're going to ask one more question. The date later. There we go. So, save that. So that takes care of all of our general questions. Okay, so now we've got all of those compartmentalized inside a dialogue. So let's go back to our original topic. So back to COVID. Now we're going to go to our authoring canvas, and down here, what we want to do is we want to redirect to another topic, and we want to redirect to general questions. Okay? So, and notice what it's saying here. Topic redirects now return. After the bot goes to another topic, it will return back here to continue the conversation. This is really important, okay? Because again, remember, bots are a workflow. And you really got to understand where you are in that workflow. And that's so important. And I'll tell you why. Because there are times when I have been developing bots where you will get several layers down, and then the user will have to respond to something. And the user will think it's back at the top level and it can ask whatever it wants. And it's like, wait a minute, you're not up here. I'm looking for the answer, a different kind of answer. And it doesn't you don't understand where you are in the flow, right? So understanding where you are in the flow and being able to make sure you're programming for that is super important, okay? And it all really has to work seamlessly. So that's why it's important to understand, okay, you know, this goes to this, goes to this, okay? So once we're back here, let's go ask another question. This time, let's use the info we gained from the general questions to ask our next question. And this time, I'm going to use this little X button up here. And notice how right now it only has should start. And the reason why it only has that is because, yes, I'm for sure going to say that. When I created this topic, I forgot to make these variables bot specific, right? You guys didn't tell me, you know, you just let me keep going without doing that. So what did that mean? So I couldn't see it before, but now they're bot specific. And because they're bot specific, I can see them from anywhere, okay? So if I go back to topics and I go back to general, or back to COVID rather, and I come down here, and now I go to ask a question, and I hit this little X, I get bot.name, okay? So I made bot.name bot specific. So what I want to say here is, I want to say, so using the person's name, thanks for that general information, okay? So the bot's going to use the person's name, and then it's going to ask it about one of two things. So now let's choose our multiple choice options, okay? So now we're going to use our multiple choice options, and our two multiple choice options are going to be talk directly to a doctor, a new option. And notice as I add options, more options appear here. Okay, so those are our two options. So now let's create our conditions. Oh, let's change our variable. Let's make our variable response. Okay, is equal to. Okay, so notice it kind of did a little bit of the heavy lifting for me. So in here, it's talk directly to a doctor, and here it's answer some COVID questions. Okay. So if we're talking directly to a doctor, we can use this there we go. This end to conversation, transfer to agent piece. Remember how I said you can do a human handoff? So this will do a human handoff. And one of the things that we can do inside here is to send the person who's getting the handoff a private message, okay? This is important to note because a lot of times what people will put inside this box is what they think the bot's going to say to the person. It's not that. It's what the bot's going to say to the person who's accepting the human handoff. So, you know, I might say something like this user's name is, you know, something like that, right? I'm giving a little bit of information to the agent, okay? So if they got a doctor, you know, that's where the agent will have that information right at hand, right? How many times have you called up customer service, explained your whole situation, and they're like, oh, let me transfer you to someone who knows what they're talking about, and then you have to explain it all over again, right? This kind of alleviates that. So the other path is to start asking some questions. Now, I know that there are a series of many questions to ask, but I'm only going to ask two because it's 3:10 and we're already over a little bit of time, and I want to leave some time for questions at the end. Okay, so let me ask two very quick questions. So ask a question. And in the interest of time, I'm going to break the fourth wall facade. Yes, I have this stuff written down. I know you thought I remembered it all from memory, but I don't. So what is this going to be? It's going to be a Boolean, right? Because it's a yes or no question. And we're going to call this and we are going to have a condition, okay? And if this COVID question 1 is equal to false, I want to continue on. But if it's equal to true, then I want to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call another topic that I'm going to create eventually. But for right now, I'm going to just ask another question. Okay, and the second question is going to be okay, Boolean. Okay, and again, I have a condition. So, question 2 is equal to false. Okay, so you see kind of how this goes, right? We're going to ask some COVID questions. It's going to ask the first question. If the answer is true, then it's going to do something. If it's false, it's going to ask another question, right? So what happens if it's true? Now, I could create two different messages here that say the exact same thing, okay? But that's silly. Why would I do that? I'm just going to create a single topic that's going to say one thing, and I'm going to connect both of these conditions to that same topic, okay? So let's do that. And let's call this COVID positive. Okay, and all it's going to say is, from your answers, it seems unlike, oh, let's say, from your answers, it seems okay. So, there we go. So back to COVID. Okay, so we say yes. Then what we want to do is redirect to COVID positive. And then here, I'm going to redirect to COVID positive. Okay. Now I could hypothetically end the conversation here, like with this, and end with survey, but I don't have to. Okay. It will automatically end once I hit the end. Okay, the only reason you have to quote unquote end is if you want to end a specific way, if you want to end with like survey or something like that, or end by transferring it. Okay, so let's try it. Yes, I'm ready to get started. Oh, I also want to put on this track between topics piece up here, because what that's going to allow me to do is, let me just start this over so I can show you. What it's going to allow me to do is it's actually going to change the topics on the right-hand side as I keep going. Okay, 1-1. Yes, I'm ready to get started. Okay. So now you see how it changed over to general questions. My age. Don't tell anyone. Okay, so I want to answer some simple COVID questions because that's the more fun one. The talking to a doctor is basically going to say, okay, great, I'm going to send you to a doctor, and then that's going to be it. So have anyone in your household had any of the following symptoms? No. Yes. Oh, did I grab the wrong one? Hold on a second. Might have grabbed the wrong one. Has anyone in your household? Oh, I didn't put one in there. Man, I can't count on you guys for anything. All right, there we go. Okay, real quick. Okay. I'm 423 years old. Okay. Just COVID questions. Yes. Why does it do that? Stand by. So if the COVID question is equal to false, then it's going to do this. Oh, all other. Man, Matt, you're really not. Oh, is it because I'm not saving? There we go. Oh, it's because you know what it was? I didn't save it before when I tested it, and it tried to tell me when it was changing topics, but you know, I thought I was smarter than it. Clearly, I was not. All right, third time's a charm. Okay, so this time we got there, okay? So now, if I type in hi, it brings me to the hi thing. So that signaled the end of that topic, right? And then now I'm back to essentially the top level that allows me to just enter in more, right? Okay. So one last thing. Now, wouldn't it be great if we can combine the Q&A maker functionality with this, right? Well, we can. So if we go up here to back over here to home, and then topics, and then suggested topics, okay? So what this does is we actually can pick a website to suggest topics. I see your comment, Nasser. I have an answer for you in a minute. Well, not really an answer, but another comment of my own. And the website I'm going to use is one you might be familiar with. It's some of the frequently asked questions here. Someone's been playing around with some chatbot functionality. Okay. And we're going to add that and hit start. So what this is going to do is it's going to look at that website and it's going to be grabbing all of the FAQs from that website. And what it's going to do is it's going to create topics based upon those FAQs. Okay. And this makes it super simple to try and interface Q&A Maker functionality with your Power Virtual Agents functionality as well. Now, this kind of really just scratched the surface of some of the stuff that you can do in Power Virtual Agents. And I'm actually over time of some of the things that I can cover here, right? So, there's things like analytics, there's things like entities that we can talk about. I do kind of want to just talk about publishing really quick. But, again, you kind of saw in me doing some of these step-by-step things, how easy it is, right? How easy it is to be able to get some of this stuff going. And really, a lot of it is about this idea of just going and playing with it, right? And a lot of this stuff, especially in programming, is just about going and playing, right? So you see now I have a bunch of suggested things. So like, what is my CSN? And I can promote these to topics. So now I took that and I added it to my existing topic. So it's taking the question of what is my CSN and it's moving it over to an existing topic. It added a trigger phrase for me. And if I walk in here and I go to authoring canvas, it put the question, it put the answer, and then it ended the conversation. It actually ended it with hold on, let me go back to. There we go. Oh, come on. Come on, demo gods. Don't be that way to me. Can it have me end on a bad note, demo gods? It's not very nice. Oh, this topic has been turned off. That's why. Okay. I'll play your game, you rogue. There we go. There. See? Now we get it. Okay? So the idea is it gets put in suggested topics and then you can publish it to existing. Okay? Speaking of publishing, publishing is easy as clicking publish. Okay? Same type of idea of one-click publishing, this notion that you can publish something and then be able to try it out on a demo website. Here it is. See, all of our stuff, COVID. Okay, so that was probably the quickest PVA-ish demo that I could give. So let's switch back quickly to our PowerPoint slides. And then I know that there are a couple of different questions in there, but I want to get to the recap first, and then I promise I will get to some of the questions so that we can make sure that we... Okay, so to recap. What is a bot and why should I care? A bot is a service that is automated, utilizes AI, and allows us to formulate a response based upon natural language or some type of context. Why should I care? It's the technology of the future, right? It's where we're going. It's where people are. Facebook Messenger, Instagram, SMS, things like that. It's a natural progression. How do we build them? Microsoft Power Platform. Low code, no code, it's easy. You saw me build one in under an hour, right? And that was with me talking my way through it. I probably could have built that thing in 10 minutes. Super simple. What are channels? Channels are ways in which we can deploy our bot, right? All the different ways, Facebook Messenger, Slack, Skype, Teams, one-click deployment, one piece of code, all those different places. Think about the chatbot lifecycle, right? Especially the UX rules. Definitely really important. Always think about UX. If it's any piece of suggestion I can give you when building bots, start there. That's where people make the biggest mistakes. They don't think about that before they start. They just want to get into code. What else did we learn about Microsoft Q&A Maker, right? Microsoft Q&A Maker is an easy way to get our bots up and running with a lot of intelligence, with little amounts of work. So taking existing knowledge bases and funneling them into our bots. And finally, we learned about Power Virtual Agents, which is the easy button for bots, for building bots. Now, a couple of different helpful links. The PVA website and the Q&A Maker website I put there. Those are the two things that I utilize to build the demos. I would feel bad if I didn't give at least a couple of different shameless plugs for Pluralsight links. These are not all mine. Two of them are the building bots with Microsoft Bot Framework getting started. That's building bots with pure code, right? So Nasser, I said I would get back to your comment. You want to build stuff in pure code? That's the one you watch, okay? If you want to build stuff in Composer, I'm actually building another course right now with Composer. It will be out within a month, so look for that. If you want to build a specific Teams application with bots, there's a building a Teams app utilizing Microsoft Bot Framework. If you want more on PVA and Q&A Maker, the two authors that handle those two things are very good. I've worked with them before, very knowledgeable. So thank you very much. You've been a very good audience. I love the questions. I did get one more question from Ryan. Is there an agent or tool that can be used to interrogate with a website search feature? Not quite sure what you mean by that. We'll say that if you want to send me a follow-up email, we can make sure that my email information is put out there, and I'm happy to provide that. We can have other discussions about it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna chime in and just say thank you, Matt, for what was an incredibly rich day of learning on a lot of different bot topics. And I think you've said it throughout, that this is really just scratching the surface and really hopefully, you know, an entree into learning more about this. Hopefully we've encouraged you guys to take what you've learned today and dig in a little bit deeper. The links that Matt provided are a great start. Just to let you know, we will be summarizing all of this content and providing the deck as well as some additional links and materials in a follow-up email. Included in that will also be a link to a survey. We would love to get your feedback. I think Gina just posted it in this chat as well. Please feel free to take that survey, add any comments that you think would be helpful for us as we think about doing this sort of curriculum again in the future, and also for the college and the city of Henderson as well. I know there's some questions in there specifically they would love for you folks to answer. So please take your time to go through that. And Matt's also posted some contact information there. All of his social is at Matt Cruz, so feel free to reach out. He loves talking shop about this kind of stuff. So with that, we'll close out. Again, thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at some point in the future. Take care, everyone.